You know what? I will just put a notice in the Yoga Teachers Forum now.
Yeah.
That or the pregnancy is more valuable. The pregnancy needs to be protected more. The pregnancy is more longed for often. And therefore, as we have discovered through doing some research of our own, that those pregnancies seem to be recommended or end up with a cesarean birth. What would you like to say about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the reasons why we started discussing this was because I mentioned at the moment I have a pregnancy class that I'm running, and I've already seen about 3 women who are of the older age for having babies, all 3 of whom I believe went through IVF, who are now being almost forced onto a route of having a cesarean. They've been told by their consultants it would be in their interest to have a cesarean. And as someone who's I had an unplanned C-section. I had a totally risk-free pregnancy. I was very lucky, but I didn't have such a lucky experience in labor, which is why I ended up having an unplanned, or as they would call it, an emergency cesarean. And because of that experience, I started looking into cesareans and why people might have cesareans, and why they may be elective or why they may be unplanned. And I was shocked by the amount of people that are, you know, taken onto this route of cesareans before they've even started to go into labor. All the 3 of my students are what I would consider to be perfectly healthy human beings. There's nothing wrong with them. And you'll often find that, I think, especially in the kind of yoga for pregnancy world, you're not likely to experience many women coming to you for pregnancy classes dealing with severe health issues during pregnancy. They're just not, because they're going to be a lot more wary. They, because of that, don't want to do as much. This is the usual, but not always, of course. So you're likely to experience women who actually have a fairly risk-free pregnancy. So when they all told me they were being told to go and have a cesarean, I thought, why? And they said, oh, because I'm over my 40s or I'm over 35. And then I thought again, why? There's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly healthy. Just because you're slightly older, it doesn't mean that you should need to have a cesarean. You should have every reason for your body to give birth vaginally. It makes no sense to me. So that's why you and I started looking this up.
and I also have a personal interest in this, because I have been blessed to be a mother of 5 children, and my number 4 and number 5 were both cesareans. One was an emergency cesarean, totally unplanned, and the second one, my number 5, was a 24-hour notice cesarean, because it was not an IVF pregnancy, but it was, I had gestational diabetes, which I probably, you know, was medically diagnosed with gestational diabetes. My baby was meant to be quite large, which in the end, he ended up being a fairly okay size. And because my number 4 had been a cesarean. And so there was that moment of, okay, well, it's just easier if we give you a cesarean for your, you know, 5th delivery, for a bunch of reasons. And there is, as we sort of talked about a little bit, there is this medicalization that the minute a woman specifically who has gone through IVF or any type of other fertility treatment is within the conventional medical system, she sort of stays in that place. And it's interesting to look at women who have natural pregnancies, you know, spontaneous pregnancies, and who are healthy during pregnancy being channeled to and maybe, you know, a medicalized for medical reasons or ease reasons or whatever it is, age or anything like that. And even more so, as we're discovering within the fertility treatment world, that they are now in this medicalized system being shuffled off down that route just because. And that just because reason is justified by the doctors for very clear medical reasons, not that they're making it up, they do want to protect the pregnancy. They do think it may be a safer option to go through cesarean rather to have the birth vaginally. But as we've said, and as you've said, that we need to be asked the questions of why. Why is there this relationship? What are the implications for the pregnant person? What is the recovery post-cesarean? And also there is an element of, and this is sort of where I come at it from my yoga for women's health perspective. I also am trained in yoga for pregnancy and birth. A woman who has gone through fertility treatment is already experiencing an emotional journey of, my body has betrayed me. I was not able to get pregnant. If the reasons for their fertility treatment is because she was not able to get pregnant naturally. There are obviously many reasons why a person may choose fertility treatment, but one of them is that they cannot get pregnant in a natural, normal way, and therefore has to go through fertility treatment, IVF. And a person in that demographic is already feeling very bad about their body. Their body is betraying them. Their body isn't functioning the way that other people's bodies function. It's not functioning in the way that you assumed or hoped it would function. And they're already very much in that emotional state of disconnect with their body or feeling betrayed by their body. And then when they're further carried along this journey of, okay, and now you're going to have a cesarean, which is not a natural birth, we need to be aware of what it does to the person. It sort of possibly can compound those feelings of another reason why my body isn't, working.
My body is failing me. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is something that I'll be discussing on my workshop, the mental impact of a cesarean on a woman, which, as you've said, is threefold. If you've started that whole journey with, my body has failed me. As someone myself who's had a cesarean and it wasn't planned, my immediate feelings, and still are, it's only been 18 months since I had my son, so I'm really still dealing with that trauma of my birth experience. You do feel like something went wrong. My body failed me, or I failed my baby, I failed myself, is really a feeling that you have. And to be told, first of all, okay, you can't get pregnant, so we're going to have to put you on this route of IVF or fertility process. Then to be told, well, because you couldn't get pregnant naturally, we are going to assume that you can't give birth naturally. I mean, that's not fair. No. Other than it being ridiculous, in my opinion, it's just not fair to say to a woman, you can't get pregnant naturally. That means you can't give birth naturally. It's not true. I mean, from the research that we've looked at, there's even, I was just trying to find it before, something at the very bottom of one of these research papers. It says, the odds of delivering by cesarean section are greater for ART singleton pregnancies compared to spontaneous.
ART means fertility treatment, artificial.
Artificial. I can't remember what the R stands for, but yeah, it's artificial.
Reproductive treatment. Artificial reproductive treatment.
That's it. Preconception and pregnancy care plans should focus on minimizing the risks that may lead to emergency cesarean sections and finding strategies to understand and decrease the rate of elective cesarean sections. The reason why they've said that as their conclusion is because on looking at the reviews and references that they've gone through to try and put this review together, they've seen that there's no real evidence that someone who's gone through IVF or ART, as they've called it, should be placed on a road to a cesarean. There's no real proof at all.
However, we did see from the research studies that we both looked at that there is
some reason,
a higher rate of cesarean birth with IVF ART pregnancies. And we can go into the reasons as to why, and we're talking a little bit about that. But at the moment, the research is showing a significantly higher percentage of cesarean birth with this with these pregnancies. And I think there is so much to unpack there, which we obviously can't do today. But we also need to look at the question that is coming up here is being in touch and in tune with your own body and what your body should naturally be able to do. And the fact that because it can't naturally get pregnant, therefore it won't naturally be able to give birth. But we know that our bodies were created to do this, you know, from the beginning of time. And for whatever reasons that you are not able to get pregnant naturally, as you said, should not disqualify you from the whole journey.
Yeah.
It shouldn't disqualify you from every part of that experience just because one part of that experience isn't working the way that maybe, you know, the universe intended it to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because when you look at these review papers or research papers, they're trying to find the reason why so many more women are ending up with a cesarean after going through ART. And they can't find the why. And I tend to find that it's exactly the same when you go through labor, generally in hospitals, definitely in the UK. I know Jacqueline was saying it's slightly different and in some cases better in Israel, which is where she is. But definitely in the UK where I am, if you give birth in hospital, you're just much more likely to go through any kind of intervention and much more likely to end up with a cesarean, especially if you've either gone through IVF or you've started off with being induced. You're far more likely to have a cesarean. If you look at both of those things, going through IVF or being induced are both medicalized. You start on the medicalized journey, they just assume you have to end that way.
It's very difficult to get off it.
It's very difficult
to get off it. And I think that is a challenge with our healthcare system in general, and specifically with women's healthcare that has been less researched, less focused on since the birthing journey was medicalized. It always was perceived that the doctor knew best. And as we mentioned actually in one of our previous conversations, that when you are in labor, you can't think straight, you are potentially in a lot of pain. At the end of the day, and I said this to all the women that I worked with in my pregnancy for yoga and birth programs, is that at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you are healthy and you give birth to a healthy baby, because at the end of the day, that is the most important thing. And we can have our plans and our ideas of what we want to happen, and we hope that our plans and wishes will be reflected in reality. But at the end of the day, you do want a healthy baby and you want to come out from the experience healthy and well. So when a doctor comes in or a midwife comes in and says, you know, we are recommending X, you go with it because you're not in this situation. It's the best thing to do. Yes, because you're not in a situation to argue. And unless you have an advocate there for you, like a doula or a qualified birthing partner, if it's just you and your partner there, or you with a family friend or whoever, family or friend, it's difficult for you to stand up for what you really want in that moment because of the reality of the situation and the reality that the minute a doctor or a medical professional stands in front of you and says, we are recommending this for you as your, you know, birthing option, it's very difficult to stand up and say, no, I don't want that.
Yeah, it's almost impossible unless you have the knowledge there, I suppose. It's just you do go into a place of fear. I mentioned to Jacqueline in our conversation before that I, on my birth plan, had put everything that I didn't want, and then I got completely the opposite, because that's what I experienced, was the midwife coming up to me saying, things aren't progressing, let's do an internal examination. And you just say, okay, because you don't think that you have any other option. Let's give you an induction because things aren't going as quickly as they should be. You say okay because you just think that you should, and then look, it's not happening, let's just do a cesarean. Okay, because again, you're being told
because
that
at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, the bottom line is you want to come out from it healthy and well, and you want a healthy and well baby, and whatever you need to do to get there, sort of you fall in line because you are within the system. And we're not bashing the system. I don't want anyone listening to us to say that we are bashing the system, because the system works very, very well in many, many cases. But we also should be able to say when it's not working well and the ways that we want to improve it and be more empowered and engaged in that process.
And I mean, I don't know if you'll agree with me. Tell me what you think on this. But I've had many students in the past who have been struggling to get pregnant. They've had all the tests done. According to the test, there is nothing wrong with the either partner. There's no physical reason that they can see why they shouldn't be able to get pregnant. So my assumption is that there's something else mentally going on. I mean, we know as yoga teachers how your mental, your emotional body, your emotional body can affect your physical body.
Yes.
So if the physical body is not doing what it should be doing and there's no reason for that, then something is going on in the emotional body. And when you think about the world that we live in these days, 90% of people are stressed. 90% of people are dealing with work stresses, home stresses, family stresses. There's just so many things that they might be going through that just make it very difficult to get pregnant. There's even a book, I haven't read it myself. I've heard the woman on a podcast. I think it's called Life in Denmark or something. This woman was trying to get pregnant. She lived, I believe, in the UK. She'd been trying to get pregnant for about 8 years. They went through IVF treatment after IVF treatment. That didn't work for her. They had all the tests done. Nothing was showing that there was a reason. She just couldn't get pregnant. And even the fertility treatments weren't working for her. Her husband ended up getting a job at Lego in Denmark. And so they decided to move there. She moved, and in a year, she got pregnant. She then got pregnant again and had twins. So she went from 8 years having nothing and trying all the fertility treatments to moving to a life where they were basically stress-free. You know, Denmark is supposed to be the happiest place on earth to live. And there's obviously something to that. And in her book, she explains why she thinks that is. And I think it's true that there's a reason for that. So then it explains why, if someone goes to the doctors and they've done all the tests and they say, well, it's not working, there's no reason why you're not getting pregnant, let's just try IVF. They say, okay. Instead of, again, the doctors looking at why. They never look at the why. They just look at the facts in front of them and say, okay, let's try and solve this without looking at why. And I think if they looked at the why, they might be able to change things without having to go the medicalized route.
So I think what you are talking about is super important. It is a very massive, big topic. It connects very much up to the other workshops that I did, which was yoga for endometriosis and yoga for PCOS, and looking at hormonal health, because, and it goes out again about women's health and the research and the understanding about a woman or a female identified person who has a reproductive system and female hormones. It can take a person between 5 and 11 years to be diagnosed with either PCOS or endometriosis, because the medical system does not understand the way that women's hormones work, the way that they are impacted by stress. I think stress is one of the biggest chronic disease triggers, and the way that female hormones are interact with stress, sleep, nutrition, what we're eating, and these are really profound factors in how that impact our health and well-being. And I think that I agree with everything that you said, and I think that part of it is that these chronic symptoms, chronic stress, chronic poor diet, chronic lack of sleep are things that are impacting us in really, really profound ways. And and I see this from my work with menopause, and I know it's a totally different demographic, but the principles are the same. That a woman who is experiencing in perimenopause and beginning to experience symptoms will go to her doctor, and the doctor will do all the tests, because all of a sudden you've got heart palpitations, all of a sudden you've got, you know, a lot of different things going on. The doctor will do all the tests and come back to you and say, but everything's fine. Your tests will come back clear. You're well. You're in perimenopause. So the doctor is not thinking about menopause symptoms, because you're potentially 42, 43, 44, 45. You get sent away and you don't feel like yourself. Mm-hmm. And you have been told that you are fine. And it is this perpetuation of seeing the woman, I use the word woman, but we, that refers to anyone that identifies as female and has a female reproductive system, is really negated her feelings, their feelings of what is going on in your body. It just reinforces that disconnect. It reinforces, as we said, that my body is failing me, my body is betraying me. Why don't I feel normal? What's going on? And I think those sentiments happen with women health issues across the board. And as we've said, the minute that you enter that medicalized system, it's very difficult to get out of it. Mm-hmm. And it requires a lot of research on your part, a lot of work and effort on your part, a lot of standing for what you know to be true to get yourself out of it. So if you have gone through fertility treatment, IVF, or any other kind of fertility treatment, and you're in that system, to then say, actually, I don't want a cesarean, I want to try for a natural birth, is really difficult, because you're already in that state of negative talk to yourself. You're already in that state that the doctor knows best. You're already in that state of my body isn't working. And I think that we don't give enough value to the other non-medical reasons that can help you, the other factors that come into your health and well-being, the other ways that you can give birth naturally. I think it's such a dense topic to talk about, and it really comes up so significantly in the two topics that we are talking about, fertility and cesarean.
It does, because you can't, I think it impacts it so much. I mean, I see with the post-cesarean women that I've worked with, and bear in mind, I haven't worked with that many, because it's only been 18 months since I started specializing in this, because it was only after having my son that I started doing all this. But in this short space of time, I've seen quite a few women post-cesarean, which firstly, I think just shows you how little support there is out there for women post-cesarean. But with the women that I've seen, the difference I've noticed is if you had an elective cesarean, after, let's say, a fairly decent pregnancy, especially if you didn't have fertility treatment to get pregnant, the way that your body then reacts to having a cesarean is very different to someone who has either started off on the medicalized route by going through fertility treatment, then going to have a cesarean, or like me, having a perfectly fine pregnancy, but then a very traumatic birth experience. The physical differences that you see in that woman are so different, to the point where women I know who had an elective cesarean with no general pregnancy issues, had no experiences really of much numbness in the scar, no pain in the scar, no bulging around the belly of the scar. They just kind of bounced back, almost like a woman who had a vaginal birth. Whereas somebody who's been through that whole route, from fertility treatments or a traumatic birth experience, they have everything. They go through everything: the numbness in the scar, the pain in the scar, the bulging around the belly, the pain in the back, the extra bleeding in your periods. It's just one thing after another. And it's, in my opinion, because I have to go very much on my opinion, because there's so little actual research out there, in my opinion, and from what I've experienced with the women I've worked with, is something to do with the fact that that scar holds emotions. If,
Yes.
for instance,
Yeah.
let's say you've had a cesarean, or you might have experienced this if you work with women, especially if you've been to any of my workshops before and you've learned my massage techniques for post-cesarean women. When you start working on that scar, it can make you feel very sick physically, and it can bring up a lot of emotional feelings when you start working with the scar.
Yeah.
And that's not just because the baby was there, it's because the scar itself is holding all of those emotions that you felt at that moment of birth, basically, and probably during labor as well.
So I think that it relates to the way the mind-body experience, and I don't think we give enough credit to the mind-body experience, and the way that muscle holds memory.
Yes.
And I think muscle memory is really powerful. And it's not just, when we talk about, muscle memory, like if you exercise, the more you exercise, the more you do it, the easier it is, and your body sort of, remembers it. And whenever you, stop, whenever you stop exercising or stop doing whatever training it is you're doing, it takes a while when you get back into it, because there's an element of muscle memory. But I don't think we really, that's a very sort of physical, superficial element of muscle memory, but there is a deep part of muscle memory. We see it in amputees. When amputees have that sensation that their limb is still there, or they feel pain in a muscle of a limb that doesn't exist anymore. Because I think that a cesarean scar, we should not negate, and I know that you do amazing work in your workshops and with your clients, about the cesarean is not just the physical element of giving birth via cesarean section. There is a very big, and it doesn't even need to, maybe it was even a planned cesarean, like we often think about cesarean from a traumatic point of view, an unplanned cesarean, but I wonder if you've seen, or if you've noticed, even from planned cesareans, and I think people who are pregnant with IVF fertility treatment babies are probably having a planned cesarean. They're not having an emergency cesarean.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
So there is that emotional connection, or emotions tied up into the muscle memory. And what I wanted to also talk about is the very physical element of cutting through the muscle layers. Because a cesarean is an operation. It is a major operation, an abdominal operation, and the recovery from it takes a while. But we also need to remember that they have cut through muscle layer. So when you're practicing yoga, if you need to do certain breath work, or you are working with certain muscle groups, or you want to work maybe with Mula Bandha or anything like that, you have had surgery. And if you've had multiple cesareans, and I've had 2 cesareans, and I now am very aware that there is certain muscles in my lower stomach that just do not function the way that they function in other people. And there is, I don't have so much trauma related to it. I had a slightly traumatic first time, but the second time wasn't so bad. And my recovery the second time was actually much, much easier than the first time. But I am fully aware the scar took a long time to heal. And I am aware that I have had twice major abdominal surgery that has impacted my muscle tone, my muscle quality, my ability. And I think that we just say, oh, she had a cesarean, they had a cesarean, without really understanding that it is a surgical procedure.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I try to help my women who I've worked with to understand, because for want of, I guess, trying to help women, I think the issue with when you have a cesarean, as a woman, you, as we've said, feel like your body has failed you. You feel like you've failed in some way. And many women don't think of a cesarean as birth, right? If, as an example, I run a birth preparation workshop, and when I've mentioned this to my women who have been told they're having a cesarean, mention, I also say they've been told they're having
Yes.
a cesarean, which they don't realize that they have a choice. They say, oh, I won't need to do that because I'm having a cesarean. I said, why? You're still giving birth. Oh no, but
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to do all the birth process. I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're still giving birth.
Yeah,
The
your
birth
body is
preparation-
still going through that journey.
Yes. So there's still many things that you will gain from this, from the workshop. Anyway, they I've forgotten what my point was now.
When they don't think it's a birth, they're not relating to it as a birth.
What did you say before I said all this? This is clearly my mummy baby brain.
We were talking about the physical element of the fact that you've had abdominal surgery.
Oh yes. So this is what I try and help my women to understand, is that they have given birth, essentially, even though they might feel like they haven't, because they didn't do it the natural way. They feel like they haven't given birth, they haven't had that experience, and so they feel very broken by it. And I think it helps to simply make them see that you have, but what you have to understand is you have had major abdominal surgery. So because we all try and help women to understand that they have given birth, and we try and make them feel better by the fact that they've had a cesarean, we forget to tell them that yes, you have given birth, but you do also have to remember you have given birth via major abdominal surgery. This means you are going to have to wait a lot longer for your body to heal. And we don't want to hear that. We want to have given birth naturally so that we can, a couple of weeks, maybe even days for some women, just get straight back to doing what we were doing, or feeling like we can get straight back to doing what we were doing. But it can take up to 2 years for your abdominal muscles to heal completely.
Wow.
That's a long time. I've done a lot of work on my scar. I've done a lot of work on my abdomen. It's strong. It's very strong, but I can feel it's still not as strong as it was before having my son. And that's because it's not been 2 years yet. If it had been 3 years, it would probably be a different story. But imagine if you've had a cesarean birth 10 years ago, and you haven't done any rehabilitation on your scar, you haven't done any rehabilitation work on your abdominal muscles, and then you're trying to do all of the normal things in life, like picking up your baby, like running from school runs to work, and all these things require abdominal strength and balance in your core to be able to do those things without causing yourself hip injuries, rectus abdominis problems. I'm talking about I've forgotten what it's called, the split in the abdominal muscles. It'll come back to
rectus abdominis. Yes,
it is.
And the other thing I want to mention also, and I know we're coming probably close to when we're going to be ending, but the other thing I wanted to mention is that work with pelvic floor muscles is critical to the female body, to our long-term health and well-being. And I think people who have had cesareans think, oh, my pelvic floor muscles are fine. I didn't give birth vaginally, so I don't need to worry about that. Without realizing that the fact of being pregnant already puts a huge amount of stress on the pelvic floor muscles. So you may not have given birth vaginally, but that doesn't mean that your pelvic floor muscles haven't gone through their own trauma, their own, just think of the weight of the baby on the pelvic floor muscles. That enough, regardless of whether you're giving birth vaginally or not, that enough is enough pressure for over 9 months to make them weaker, to impact the position of the uterus, bladder, all those different types of things. And I think that maybe for those people who have chosen to opt for a cesarean, may think that the pelvic floor muscles are something that they have protected, but actually they've been impacted just by the nature that you've been pregnant.
Yes, and in many cases with the pelvic floor, I would say to, again, many of my students, many of my women, because I'm also a pelvic floor specialist, that if towards the end of your pregnancy, you were really struggling with, you know, having to run to the toilet every 5 seconds and, you know, having leaks during the end of your pregnancy when you shouldn't be, people assume that that is just because of the weight of the baby on the bladder.
Yeah.
It's not. If you have a functional pelvic floor prior to pregnancy, and you find that throughout the whole pregnancy, towards the end of your pregnancy, you don't have many of these issues, then you probably have a good chance to have a healthy pelvic floor after giving birth, especially if you've had a really patient and gentle birth. You've got an even better chance of having a healthy pelvic floor after giving birth. But if during the end of your pregnancy you were really struggling with lots of leakages, what that's probably telling you is even before getting pregnant, you had a dysfunctional pelvic floor. And people don't realize this. I know women who prior to getting pregnant really struggled having sex because it would be painful. And they don't know that that's because of pelvic floor. They just think I've got a small vagina and my husband or partner must have a larger penis. That's not the case. It's your pelvic floor, and women don't know this. So it's all about education, which unfortunately consultants and doctors don't give you, because I hate to say it, I don't even think that many of them know. They learn about the parts of the body, and they learn
very anatomical and biological.
They 100% they have incredible knowledge that we don't have, and there are reasons that you should go and see your doctors if there are problems going on, because they know things that we don't know. But there's also things that they don't know because they only look at the body in one plane. However, we as yoga teachers, you know, I've worked with so many yoga teachers who understand that the body is not just the bones, not just the muscles, but it is the nerves, the nervous system, the fascia, the muscles and the bones,
the hormones, and the
brain,
emotion,
exactly.
and
all of that together.
100%, 100%. And I definitely think the benefit, I agree, you should always go see your medical practitioner, always. But after that, come to your yoga teacher, because we have that knowledge and that understanding that the body works in a different way. It's not just a black and white situation. Your doctor says that everything's okay, therefore everything must be okay, therefore there's something wrong with me, or therefore, you know, whatever. I'm beginning to use the terminology of pathways for healing. And I take that phrase, pathways for healing, actually from a book that my aunt wrote about her own health story and health journey. But I love that phrase, pathways to healing. If you go look up at that book on Amazon, you'll see it. I am absolutely taking her title, but I will give her the credit.
It's a great title.
From my aunt's book. And I think that we need to start understanding that the Western medical healthcare system is one way, and a super important way, but we are learning that there are now other ways, and yoga and yoga therapy and all the ways that we as yoga teachers can help our students by really having a depth of understanding of how the body works, how stress, hormones, emotion, that mind-body connection, the somatic approach is something that should be seen as an extra layer to our health journey.
I mean, Julia, who runs the Yoga Teachers Forum, she puts it very well, because she says, we can't diagnose because we are not doctors. So we can't diagnose someone with a problem. A doctor or a physiotherapist could diagnose you with a problem or a situation, but we can then look, as you said, at the big picture and see how we can help you. And although we might not be able to diagnose, we can see what's going on with the body. I mean,
we can be part of a treatment solution.
Yes. I mean, as an example, I've had students who have had pelvic floor prolapses or severe stress incontinence, and they were diagnosed with that by their consultants or by their doctors. The doctors then only look at the pelvic floor prolapse or the pelvic floor itself for a stress incontinence. When they then came to me, because whatever it was that the doctor was giving them wasn't working, I looked at the whole of them. I looked at, and I've just remembered the name now, a diastasis, whether they had
Rectus.
a diastasis recti.
Rectus, yeah.
And found that they had a diastasis recti. That immediately tells me there is a dysfunction in their whole core. That is what is causing the dysfunction in the pelvic floor. So if we look at the whole thing, then we can fix this problem that you're having. We're not going to look at the problem, we're going to look at the cause of the problem. And I think that's where we differ. We look at causes, they look at the problem itself. So
totally.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring it back to our topic, and I want to give you a few minutes to breathe before your son wakes up.
Thank you.
So tell us about the workshop that you're going to be doing, when it is, and some details, and I will share the details about the workshop that I'm going to be doing. And yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the workshop I'm running is for C-section recovery for yoga teachers, which is this Sunday, the 10th of October, from 10 a.m. till 1 p.m. on Zoom. You can book it through the Yoga Teachers Forum online courses, you'll find it. And we will be looking at all of what we've spoken about today, really, but in a very physical level. So there'll be information on how a cesarean is actually carried out, which is very important to understanding how to help someone recover. We'll be looking at how you can impact somebody's recovery through yoga, poses that you might need to change. There's nothing that I would ever say you should remove, but you could change. And then other exercises and things that you can implement into somebody's life to really aid in recovery, both mentally and physically. In my past workshops, it's been really more on the physical, but because of my own journey, which is now looking a lot more at the mental side, there will be a lot more on the mental side of recovery as well as the physical. So yes, that's what's happening. Jacqueline, please tell us about your course.
So I'm going to be doing a workshop called Yoga for Fertility Challenges. And I'm going to be looking at reasons why a person may choose or be told that a fertility journey is their way for getting pregnant. And then the different ways with a specific focus on IVF and that stages of IVF that a person goes through, and then how we can use yoga to support that person at the different stages of their IVF journey. We'll also be talking a little bit about the hormonal stuff going on, why, sort of related to the PCOS, the endometriosis, but the different categories of people that could choose or do choose or are told that this is their option. So a little bit about the theory of sort of why you would go through a fertility journey, the very real stages of the fertility journey, and then the very practical, how do you as yoga teachers and therapists support someone either on a one-to-one basis, so someone who is going through their fertility journey is coming to you for private classes on a one-to-one, or that you have people in your group classes that that have informed you that they are on this journey, and the different ways that you can support them through yoga tools, techniques, practice, and again, with a specific focus on the IVF journey and using yoga as a tool to help you support your clients through that journey. Again, the physical, the emotional, the mental journey that they go through.
Wonderful.
That workshop is on Monday, the 18th of October. And as with Amy's workshop, you can find all the details at the Yoga Teachers Forum courses.
Yes, and I think as well, Jacqueline's will be the same in the sense that if you can't make it live, they're recorded. So as long as you've purchased a ticket.
As long as you've registered, yes.
Yeah, as long as you've registered for
signed
the workshop,
up, yeah.
you'll receive the recording afterwards.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline. That was fascinating. Really good chat. And I'm glad that we managed to somehow get this recorded.
Get it out there into the internet world.
So we'll be posting this everywhere so that you can.
Yeah, we're gonna share the links to the recording of this. So yeah, wow, fascinating. Thank you, Amy. This was
Thank
great.
You so much,
Thank you
Jacqueline.
so much.
Take care. Speak to you soon.